I never thought I'd be ziplining through a Costa Rican rainforest at 72. The harness dug into my hips, my arthritic hands gripped the handles, and my heart pounded like it might burst through my chest. "You ready, Senora?" the guide asked with a grin. Was I? My grandkids back home wouldn't believe this. 3 years earlier, I'd barely left my house after Frank passed away. Now here I was, suspended hundreds of feet above the forest floor, about to literally take the plunge. I took one deep breath and nodded. And that moment, that terrifying, exhilarating moment, changed everything I believed about what senior travel could be. You know, there's this ridiculous myth that once you hit 65, your traveling days are meant to be limited to bus tour and cruises. Don't get me wrong, I love a good cruise. But somewhere along the way, we've been fed this narrative that adventure belongs to the young, that exploration has an expiration date. I'm here to tell you that's absolute nonsense. Some of the most fascinating travelers I've met were well into their 70s and 80s. Take my friend Alina, who started backpacking solo through Southeast Asia at 68 after her hip replacement. She told me, "Margaret, I've got better stories now than I ever did in my 20s, and I actually remember them all." The truth is, travel in our senior years offers something uniquely powerful: perspective. We bring decades of life experience to every new place we visit. We notice details younger travelers might miss. We appreciate moments differently. And contrary to what society might suggest, we're not looking for the most comfortable rocking chair. Many of us are looking for the next mountain to climb, literally or figuratively. When I stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon last year, I wasn't just seeing a magnificent natural wonder. I was experiencing it through the lens of someone who's loved and lost, who's weathered storms, who understands that beauty and time are precious commodities. That's something no 20-year-old backpacker can fully grasp, no matter how many countries they've checked off their list. Let's be honest about something. The biggest obstacle to senior travel isn't physical limitations, it's the voice in our heads. That nagging little voice that whispers, "You're too old for this. What if something happens to you?" Or, "Isn't it irresponsible to spend your retirement fund on travel?" I heard those voices too. Loudly. Especially after losing Frank. For nearly a year, I barely left my neighborhood. My daughter Jamie would call every Sunday, gently suggesting little trips. "Mom, there's a nice museum exhibit downtown," or "Why don't you visit Aunt Susan in Phoenix?" But the thought of navigating airports alone or sleeping in strange beds seemed overwhelming. The turning point came when my grandson sent me a postcard from Thailand during his gap year. It showed an elderly Thai woman paddling a canoe through a floating market, her face weathered but radiant with life. On the back he'd written, "Saw this lady and thought of you, Grandma. She's selling mangoes and living her best life. When are you going to start living yours again?" That postcard is still on my refrigerator. It took small steps. A weekend trip to a nearby state park. Then a guided tour to New Orleans. Each journey built confidence. Each return home reminded me that I was capable. What I've learned is that our minds create most of our limitations. Yes, I need to manage my arthritis. Yes, I take medications that require some planning. But these aren't roadblocks, they're just details to factor into the journey. Now, I'm not suggesting we ignore the realities of aging bodies. That would be foolish. I can't hike as far as I once could, My knees protest on steep stairs. And let's not even talk about jet lag. It hits differently at 70 than it did at 40. But here's what I've discovered. Accessible travel isn't about limiting yourself. It's about being strategic. I now build rest days into my itineraries. Where I once might have raced through 3 European cities in a week, I now spend a full week really getting to know one place. And you know what? It's better this way. I notice more. I connect with locals. I find the hidden cafes where real people gather, not just the tourist traps. I've also embraced what I call the art of the upgrade. My younger self would have scoffed at paying extra for a direct flight or a hotel closer to main attractions. Now I recognize these aren't luxuries. They're investments in energy conservation that allow me to fully enjoy my destination. Physical preparation matters too. 6 months before my trip to Peru, I started a simple walking program. Just 20 minutes daily at first, eventually building to an hour. By the time I faced the moderate trails around Machu Picchu, my body was ready. Was I the fastest one on the path? Certainly not. But I wasn't the slowest either, and I made it with dignity intact and enough energy to actually appreciate where I was. The human body is remarkably adaptable at any age. It responds to the challenges we give it. I'm not climbing Everest, but I'm climbing my own personal mountains, and the view is just as sweet. Isn't travel expensive? I hear this question constantly from other seniors. And yes, it can be, but it doesn't have to break the bank. One of the greatest advantages of senior travel is flexibility with timing. We're not bound by school schedules or limited vacation days. This means we can travel during shoulder seasons, those magical weeks just before or after peak tourist times when the weather is still lovely, but prices drop dramatically and crowds thin out. Last September, I visited the Greek islands when families had returned home for school, but before the weather turned. My charming room on Naxos cost half what it would have in July, and I could actually get photos of scenic spots without 20 strangers in the background. Senior discounts are real and abundant, but often unadvertised. I've made it a habit to always ask, do you offer a senior rate? Whether booking trains in Europe, museum entries, or even at restaurants. The worst they can say is no, but surprisingly often the answer is yes. House sitting has become another financial game changer for me. Through reputable websites that verify members, I've stayed in beautiful homes in France, Australia, and Canada, all for free in exchange for caring for someone's home and pets while they travel. As seniors, we're often seen as reliable, responsible house sitters. Our age becomes an advantage. Travel insurance, however, is one area where I don't cut corners. As we age, comprehensive coverage becomes non-negotiable. But even here, there are strategies. Annual policies can be more economical for frequent travelers, and some credit cards offer coverage if you book your trip with them. The financial aspect of travel requires balance, being frugal where it makes sense, but recognizing when spending more actually enhances your experience or safety. I'd rather take fewer trips but fully enjoy them than pinch pennies so severely that I'm anxious or uncomfortable throughout my journey. After 42 years of marriage, traveling alone was perhaps my greatest fear. Frank had always been our navigator, the one who handled logistics and carried the heavy bags. How would I manage without him? The first solo trip was to Vancouver, close enough to home to feel safe, but foreign enough to push my boundaries. Like, booked a small group walking tour my first morning, which provided orientation and introduced me to fellow travelers. 2 women from that tour, one from Australia, one from Chicago, became my dinner companions for the next 3 evenings. That's the surprising secret about solo travel that nobody tells you. You're rarely actually alone unless you want to be. In fact, I've found it easier to meet people traveling solo than when I traveled as part of a couple. There's something about being on your own that makes you more approachable and perhaps more open to new connections yourself. Solo travel has taught me to trust my instincts again, to problem solve, to sit comfortably in restaurants by myself without feeling self-conscious. These are gifts I never expected this late in life, a renewed sense of competence and independence. Of course, I take precautions. I share my itinerary with my children. I use reputable hotels in safe areas. I avoid arriving in new cities after dark. But these are simply common sense measures that any traveler should consider. For those not ready to go completely solo, group tours designed for seniors offer a wonderful middle ground. I've taken several through Road Scholar, an organization specifically focused on educational travel for older adults, and found myself among like-minded travelers with fascinating life stories. Many were solo travelers like me, and some have become dear friends I now meet up with for new adventures. The most profound lesson from solo travel came to me on a quiet evening in a small restaurant in Portugal. I was enjoying a perfect meal, watching the sunset over the Atlantic, when it struck me that I wasn't lonely at all. I was simply alone, and there was unexpected peace in that distinction. A peace I couldn't have imagined in those dark days after Frank's passing. Let's talk about something practical that concerns many senior travelers: managing health conditions away from home. Because let's face it, most of us are taking at least some medications, and many of us have chronic conditions that require attention. Preparation is everything. I've developed a system that works for me, and perhaps some elements will work for you too. First, I always travel with a complete list of my medications, including generic names, dosages, and what each treats. This document includes my doctor's contact information and basic medical history. I keep one copy in my suitcase, one in my day bag, and a digital version on my phone. For medications, I pack double what I need in separate bags, just in case luggage goes missing. For international trips, I bring a doctor's letter explaining why I need certain medications, especially if they're controlled substances or require syringes. Time zone changes can complicate medication schedules. Before leaving, I consult with my pharmacist about how to gradually adjust timing. For my blood pressure medication, for example, I need to shift slowly over several days rather than making an abrupt change. I've found that a simple pill organizer isn't sufficient for lengthy trips. Instead, I use a system of labeled Ziploc bags, one for each day of the journey, with all that day's medications inside. This makes it immediately obvious if I've missed a day. Travel medical insurance is non-negotiable at our age, particularly for international destinations. Medicare rarely covers overseas care, and even domestic coverage can be complicated when you're out of network. I research policies carefully, ensuring they cover pre-existing conditions and include evacuation coverage if needed. One health aspect many don't consider is managing jet lag, which affects seniors more severely. I start adjusting my sleep schedule before departure, stay hydrated during flights, and commit to spending the first day mainly outdoors at my destination. The natural light helps reset my internal clock faster than anything else I've tried. Technology has been surprisingly helpful too. I use medication reminder apps and store digital copies of prescriptions in an encrypted file. My smartwatch tracks my steps and reminds me to move regularly during long flights to reduce the risk of blood clots. The most important health tool, though, is honesty with yourself and your travel companions. I've learned to honor my limits without feeling diminished by them. Sometimes that means taking a taxi instead of walking, or choosing a relaxed afternoon instead of another museum. This isn't giving up, it's smart management of energy resources. Some of my most meaningful travel experiences haven't been solo adventures, but trips with my children and grandchildren. There's something magical about experiencing a place through multiple generational perspectives simultaneously. Last summer, I rented a villa in Tuscany for 2 weeks and invited my entire family, my daughter and her husband, my son and his partner, and my 3 grandchildren, ages 12, 17, and 21. Planning this kind of trip requires diplomatic skills worthy of the United Nations, but the rewards are immeasurable. The key to successful multi-generational travel is building an itinerary with something for everyone, while also creating space for different pacing. Our Tuscany mornings often included cultural activities, a museum or historic site, when everyone's energy was fresh. Afternoons offered choices. My son-in-law and oldest grandson might go hiking, while I took the younger ones for gelato in the village square, and others might rest at the villa. We came together for dinners, sharing stories of our separate adventures. I watched my teenage granddaughter truly see me as I negotiated in broken Italian with a local antique dealer, her eyes widening with the realization that Grandma had skills and courage she hadn't witnessed before. These trips allow grandchildren to know us outside the context of holiday dinners and birthday celebrations. They see us as whole people with interests, abilities, and even weaknesses. Meanwhile, traveling with younger family members pushes me beyond my comfort zone. I've tried paddleboarding and played midnight beach volleyball because of their influence. Practical considerations matter in multi-generational travel. Private home rentals often work better than hotels, providing communal spaces while allowing for privacy. Clear conversations about finances up front prevent misunderstandings. I typically cover the accommodation, while family members contribute in other ways. Technology differences can actually become bridges rather than barriers. My grandchildren document our trips on Instagram and TikTok, giving me glimpses into their world. Meanwhile, I share context and historical perspectives they might otherwise miss. The beauty of multi-generational travel lies in its legacy aspect. These shared experiences become the stories family members tell and retell. They form bonds that transcend the ordinary relationships of daily life. When my time eventually comes, these memories will remain as vibrant connections between generations that might otherwise drift apart. Beyond the practical aspects, there's something profoundly transformative about travel in our senior years that deserves recognition. Each journey has changed me in ways I never anticipated. Travel at this stage of life has dismantled my assumptions about myself, about other cultures, about what's possible. In Morocco, I stayed with a Berber family who showed me a different model of aging, one where elders remained central to family life, valued for wisdom rather than marginalized. This experience prompted me to reconsider my own relationship with my adult children, leading to more honest conversations about our future. Travel has also provided perspective on my own mortality, not in a morbid sense, but in a clarifying way. Standing before ancient structures built by hands long turned to dust, I feel both my insignificance and my connection to the continuing human story. This perspective has helped me release petty worries and focus on living meaningfully in whatever time remains. Physical challenges overcome during travel have rebuilt my confidence. When I successfully navigated the Tokyo subway system alone, with its bewildering array of lines and Japanese-only signage in some stations, I felt a surge of capability that transferred to other areas of life. If I could manage that, surely I could learn to handle my own investments or tackle the technology upgrades I'd been avoiding at home. Travel has provided a crash course in adaptability, perhaps the most essential skill for aging well. When flights are canceled, reservations lost, or weather disrupts carefully made plans, we must pivot quickly. Each successful adaptation builds resilience that serves us well beyond our journeys. Perhaps most importantly, travel has connected me with a community of like-minded seniors who refuse to be defined by narrow expectations of aging. Through travel groups, online forums, and chance meetings in far-flung guest houses, I've found my tribe, people who understand both the challenges and joys of exploring the world in our third act. The psychological benefits extend beyond the trips themselves. Having future journeys planned gives me purpose and forward momentum. On difficult days when arthritis flares or loneliness creeps in, I can open my travel journal or research my next destination, instantly shifting my focus from limitations to possibilities. As I look back on that terrifying moment on the Costa Rican zip line, the moment I almost backed out, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude that I found the courage to step off the platform. Not just because of the exhilarating ride that followed, but because of what it represented, a refusal to let age define what's possible. Travel in our senior years isn't just about collecting passport stamps or photographs. It's about continuing to grow when society expects us to contract. It's about maintaining curiosity when others might. Surrender to routine. It's about finding new pieces of ourselves when we thought the puzzle was complete. I'm not suggesting everyone needs to zip line through rainforests or trek to remote villages. Your adventure might be a quiet week in a seaside town you've always wanted to visit, or finally seeing the masterpieces in museums you've only read about. The specific destination matters less than the decision to keep exploring, to resist the narrative that adventure belongs only to the young. If you're watching this and feeling that stirring of wanderlust, don't ignore it. Start small if you need to. Research destinations that call to you. Join online communities of senior travelers. Take that first step, even if it's just booking a weekend getaway to a neighboring state. Remember that travel at our age isn't about checking items off a bucket list before time runs out. It's about deepening our experience of life while we're very much still living it. I'd love to hear about your own senior travel experiences or answer questions you might have about getting started. Leave a comment below and let's continue this conversation. If you found this helpful, please subscribe to Senior Travel Adventures for weekly inspiration and practical advice. Because the road is still open, my friends. And we have places to go, people to meet, and lives to keep living, fully and adventurously, for however many years stretch before us. Safe travels until next time.